I'm Julia Plevin.
And I am Lucy Knops, and we are the founders of Troublemakers. Julia and I both have a lifelong kind of love and passion for food, like most of us in this room, whether it's ugly food or cannabis-infused food. But we met back in graduate design school a couple years ago, and that's kind of where we started Troublemakers. And also, we currently work as designers and strategists, so we're talking about food and beverage today, but from the kind of perspective of designers. So our first product is called Critter Bitters. These are cocktail bitters made from toasted crickets. We, as I said, developed this in grad school, and today what we're going to talk to you about is a little bit of why we created this product and talk you through some of our process of how we actually developed it. Now that we've been working with this, often when we tell people that we make bitters out of crickets, we get this, we're really used to this kind of like, come again, like what are you doing, why are you doing that? And the answer is really that it is a product of design, but we didn't originally set out to design a product. We were really setting out to design for behavior change. And then the result of that wound up being a product. So how do you design for behavior change? We kind of see the first step is trying to figure out what behavior it is that you're trying to change. And for us, that was getting people to eat insects. And why do we care about people eating insects? Up until a couple years ago, we didn't even really know much about this or know that it was a thing. And when we met in grad school in 2013, earlier that year, the UN had published a report, the UN FAO had published a report kind of citing entomophagy, which is the eating of insects, as one of the most viable solutions to the world's impending food shortage. Insects themselves are a really nutrient-rich source of protein. It's much more gentle on the environment than most of our other sources of protein. So overall, it's kind of just this amazing nutrient-rich source of food. Already, around 2 billion people across 80% of the world consume insects as part of their normal diet. For those of us who don't, in mostly Western cultures, the thing that's kind of scientifically referred to as the ick factor is the biggest challenge that we need to overcome. So us meeting each other in design school, being presented with this report, it was kind of a great area as designers to try to figure out how we can design behavior change in this area.
So designers love constraints or design principles. And so when we set out to do this, we're like, all right, what are the 4 things that we want to like really make this, whatever we're setting out to design, what do we want it to be? And so these are things that we found were appropriate for us. They're not right or wrong. They're just what we thought were ways to accelerate behavior change and how we wanted to do it. So the first one is interactive. So much of what we do in life is sit back and consume and take things in. We wanted to get people like up and involved. We wanted to bring people together, and partly because people are always influenced by the people around them. The second one is playful. When you're talking about things like climate change, impending food shortages, these feel really scary and daunting. There's nothing that you as one person can do to help this. And so you might have this like anxiety or even paralysis. But when you invite people to be playful, all of a sudden there's a lightheartedness, there's a creativity, a fun, and we think that's actually a great way to create positive change. The third is here and now. There are designers working on beautiful products for when we will already be eating insects on a regular basis. I don't know if anyone has seen the kitchen top mealworm farm that some of our people we know are doing, which is beautiful and we love it, but we wanted to design for that first step. What would it take for us and our peers to start eating insects? And the fourth is elevated. We wanted to create something that really felt aspirational, that was high design, and that could eventually trickle down to more and more people. So in doing some research, how people, punchline, how people,
I didn't get her the right timing there, but
how people already are eating insects around the world, the history of eating insects, ways that people try new things, we quickly landed on the insight that people will try anything in a cocktail. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. If you're seeing a cocktail menu or you're sitting next to a bartender, they start mixing something up. You don't know what it is, but you're like, cool, I'll try it.
Yeah, there's this nice thing where you're kind of trusting the artist in front of you, whether that's a bartender to whatever they're going to throw in your drink. You're like, I'm going to trust you that this is something that is going to taste good, and you might kind of push your own boundaries. So from kind of those 4 design principles, and then once we kind of landed on this insight, we really decided to hone in on cocktail culture of where we wanted to really like explore in that area.
And it just so happened that cocktail culture fit perfectly with these design principles that we had set up. It's inherently interactive, whether you're at home or at a bar. It's playful. We see like mixing drinks, like magic potions. It's basically an adult sandbox. It's the here and now. There's been a great resurgence of cocktail culture around the country, around the world, and especially where we are from, San Francisco and New York.
And here in LA.
And in LA.
There's great cocktails here.
Yes. And elevated. There's something about drinking a cocktail that takes you out of your daily grind and really lets you kind of feel special in that moment, even more so than a glass of wine or a beer.
So from that, this is where we started to play. We reached out to mixologist friends, chefs, botanists. We started talking to brewmasters and thinking about what we could do with insects and alcohol. We had dreams of creating mash from insects and crickets and then turning that into whiskey. But then finally, we landed on bitters. Bitters have a great, rich history, kind of pre-prohibition. There was tons of bitters on the market, and they were all kind of marketed as this like cure-all for all of your health issues, like you can see here. After Prohibition, that kind of died out, and we were left with kind of 2 main bitters companies. But there's also this amazing history from the kind of herbal medicine, plant medicine world, where extracting tinctures and infusions is a great way to pull out the nutrients and consume those nutrients from plants and herbs and roots. Kind of the third amazing thing is it's a way where you're getting really this like concentrated flavor from whatever the main ingredient is that you're trying to celebrate. And we really loved all of these elements of cocktail bitters.
Yeah, so if you ever have a stomachache, bitters and soda is a great cure-all, even today. But when we were playing, we realized that crickets have a great taste when they're infused in alcohol. It's like this, yeah, it's awesome.
Trial and error.
It's this rich, kind of nutty, honey, earthy, hints of cacao or vanilla that we were excited about. Everyone we brought it to and tried it, they were excited about. We just brought over to a barkeeper over here in Silver Lake yesterday, and they're buying 2 cases. I don't know, but it worked out.
And then there's also this was kind of encouraging for us too, as we did more research. We realized that there's a precedent of insects in alcohol. A lot of us are familiar with the worm in mezcal. There's scorpion vodka. And then Campari, which is a fun fact because we both are huge fans of Campari. Up until a couple years ago, Campari got its red color from a dye derived from the cochineal beetle called carmine.
And that's the same if in the Starbucks strawberry frappuccinos got its pink color from that same ingredient up until like 2012.
So with all of these things, I'm kind of focusing on bitters and then doing some research, experimenting with the crickets and their flavor, knowing that there was a precedent. That's where we landed on critter bitters as where it stands today, cocktail bitters made from crickets. And we could kind of continue on that story of like where we've gone since then, since we developed this in school. But you might be wondering what happened to the original statement that we were trying to design for behavior change. And these are bitters, which is fun in a cocktail. But what we realized in the process is that the bitters themselves are kind of inconsequential to this larger story. We have come to see them as a MacGuffin. And a MacGuffin, kind of popularized by Alfred Hitchcock in film, is the idea that there's an object in a film or story that serves to set and keep the plot in motion, despite usually lacking intrinsic importance. So the bitters themselves are kind of like this drop in the bucket, but in a plot that we see of this overarching story about entomophagy. And the bitters are kind of that starting point, that conversation in pushing this plot forward. And then what we, as kind of designers, have seen is that we see this larger framework that you can kind of use as a structure for creating behavior change, and the first step in that is conversations. So with the bitters, as soon as we tell people what we do or we have them in front of them, that's kind of the thing that initially just like gets someone to respond and like ask you what you're doing or why you're doing it. And then from that conversation, you start to build a relationship. So there's a relationship with me and the person I'm talking to. They're starting to have a relationship with the product or with the concept itself. And then from that relationship, we're also building awareness. So someone that might have never heard about entomophagy before, now it's kind of in their mind, and it's one of those things that once you hear about something, you start to see it everywhere in the world around you. Or you might just start to pay attention to it in the world around you. And kind of all of those things, the conversations, the relationships, the awareness, that's where we see it all kind of laddering up to create this behavior change. That might first just be on the small scale where someone tries something in the course of an evening, but then that's where we see it really kind of laddering up where people are given the kind of courage and the awareness to actually change what they're doing. And then where we see potential to really create larger change is when enough individuals go through this behavior change and start having conversations, that can influence their entire community, and then you can have larger cultural change.
So, and it's worked. We've seen it happen over the course of an evening. Someone comes in and they're like, I've never had bugs, this is weird. We give them a cocktail with critter bitters, and they're like, okay, cool, not so bad. Next thing you know, they're eating the bowl of crickets as if it's popcorn. We're starting to see this on a community level as bars and restaurants and liquor stores start carrying critter bitters. And our dream is to see it happen on a cultural level as more and more, as it grows, as critter bitters become the norm. And we really see that as a way to change the entire food system. So it's something that, starting with conversations can then ladder up to huge cultural change. And this is kind of our secret sauce that we're giving away to you guys right now. So with those design principles and this framework, we see this as something that it can work for entomophagy, which is edible insects, but it can also work for some of the other big issues of today, some of those what-ifs. And that's where we see our mission for our company, Troublemakers, which is to design tangible solutions that make complicated issues easier to digest and lead to behavior change. We encourage you guys to, go out and create that change. This is where you can find us. And
yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.